through Laura Foster, and they are going to be walking us through the design and delivery of Solve, which is a sustainable ideas workshop. It's a one-day innovation sprint that aligns with the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 14. And the general format of these sessions is that the guest speakers will speak for, we've had anything between 40 minutes to 50 minutes. Angela, I think you said you're going to try and leave about 15 minutes for questions. Yeah, so people feel free to be posting your questions or comments as they occur to you in the chat, and we will make sure that we come back to them. Okay. If there's anything to add to that, go for it. Otherwise, thank you so much for doing the session for us. Look forward to hearing all about it.
Thank you, Catherine. Thanks for such a lovely welcome, and thanks to everybody who's here on screen with us today. I'm going to attempt to share a slide presentation. There's quite a lot of volume of material, and as said, the intention really is to take you through in a fairly conversational way how we came to deliver a one-day sprint focused on sustainability. Can everybody see clearly? That's great. So, as said in the promotional communications, our intention was to sprint, solve and sustain in Sunderland to advance our entrepreneurial education through place-based innovation. As Catherine's just said, Solve was a one-day co-curricular innovation sprint. And I think my intention really, or our intention rather, is to take you through this in a fairly simplistic fashion in terms of the where, what, who, when, why, and how. Could talk at length about this, but the simplicity aspect I think is key for a couple of reasons. Innovation sprints can sound terribly complicated. The way that I come at them is to try and sort of demystify the process as much as possible, and particularly so with Solve. And I'll give you some of the reasons why simplicity was key as we go through the presentation. So, a couple of pictures of Laura and I. I'll introduce myself first and then hand over to Laura. So, I came to University of Sunderland in 2025 in time for this academic year in Laura's entrepreneurial development team. Prior to that, I'd worked for an innovation organisation. Those of you in the Northeast may be aware of it, called Innovation Super Network. My key project on that was working as an innovation manager on the Innovate UK Digital Launchpad programme. And through that, I was tasked with establishing and nurturing an EdTech cluster to help startups and scale-ups in digital and tech. Alongside that, I worked on innovation sprints and everything really from large-scale utility companies through to third sector charities. Prior to that, 20 plus years working in industry in all things brand and innovation and research. Laura, I'll hand over to you, please.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I'm Laura Middlemass. I'm the Sustainability Manager at the University of Sunderland. And one of the things I'm working on here is to working with academic colleagues, even though I'm part of estates and facilities, to try and kind of build a framework that will help us to embed sustainability throughout the curriculum and programmes in a sort of consistent way, and I suppose in a measurable way. Understanding this becoming a key area of knowledge and skills that students and graduates are going to really benefit from having and understanding. And before this, I worked as part of the sustainability team in Newcastle hospitals, so understand how it is in reality to try and make change happen within a big complex system, and needing to work with colleagues from clinical and non-clinical backgrounds to try and make sustainable healthcare become more of a mainstream consideration. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Laura. And I think what we'd like to really sort of hopefully showcase in our conversation today is how we came together as two departments and converge to, have conversations and co-create. A snapshot of our promotional material. This was shown around the university, and intentionally it was not communicated as an innovation sprint up front, a sustainable ideas workshop. The intention on my part was to try and keep this as accessible as possible from the outset, communicated as not a competitive process, but rather a collaborative one to come along and generate ideas together. In terms of the timing on that promotional material, we've got the date up there. It took place on the 18th of November. It was a process of 2 parts, which I'll come on to talk about a little bit further through the presentation. But importantly, it happened in Global Entrepreneurship Week. Slide says UK. Obviously, that is a worldwide festival of entrepreneurship and the largest one on the planet. And it's celebratory, and we typically at the University of Sunderland, there's a back history of marking that occasion and doing a social impact workshop. So Solve fitted that task. To give you a snapshot of the key points of Solve, it was a 1-day co-curricular innovation sprint. My background is typically delivering sprints which last 5 days. To do it in 1 day is a super sprint. It certainly is, and I'll talk a little bit more about the sort of benefits and challenges of doing it in such a tight time frame. It focused on and was inspired by the United Nations SDG 14, Life Underwater, sustainability of the river and ocean in Sunderland and indeed beyond. In terms of the challenge statement, typically when you do a sprint which lasts for 5 days, you can play around a bit more about how that might look. With a fast track 1-day sprint, you need to get that focus pretty much from the outset, but keep it as broad as possible so as not to off-put any potential participants. So the challenge, or as I like to call it, the opportunity statement: how might we encourage communities in Sunderland to safeguard the sustainability of our river and coast? A key point about Solve was that it was attended by multidisciplinary students, and the participants were not known to each other before the day. There was a mix of home and international students, and what I absolutely loved about it, we had 10 nationalities together to teamwork. I felt that it was an adventure in civic literacy with a globally relevant and locally grounded common denominator theme. We were supported by external stakeholders, and I think this was game-changing in a sense that it shifted from simulation to real life. I'll talk in a bit more depth about that quite soon, about the external participants, or speakers rather, and supporters. But what I'd like to sort of communicate at the outset was that's a huge ask to get students to come in for 1 day, approximately 8 hours, give up their time and just generally sort of be there when they don't know anybody else in the room. So I was trying to think around how can we do it so that they actually also have the benefit of what I'd call touching the world, a bit of lived experience of the actual sort of the theme of the sprint. And it occurred to me that there was a way to do that by opening up the sprint to be a 2-part experience. So whilst the actual sprint day took place on November the 18th, the week before, the Tuesday before, on November the 12th, I organised an outdoor stroll, pre-sprint walk and talk gathering along the riverside and along down to the coast, the beach area of Sunderland, very close to the university. I'll talk a little bit more about soon about the team from Sunderland who generously gave up their time to accompany us on that. Before I go any further with it though, I think it's really important for me to say that right now I'm looking at it and thinking this was all pretty polished. But in truth, at the outset, and when I came to the university and being asked to create an innovation workshop, my first port of call was to take a look at sustainability, knowing that we've got a great team already in the university. However, my background is innovation. I'm not a sustainability expert. And when I looked at the UN SDGs, I felt absolutely overwhelmed by them and read around them and tried to process them and thought, how am I going to do this? I need to focus on one of those goals rather than go into the sprint with students in a one-day sprint having the option to choose which one they focused on. So I spent some time sort of ruminating that and actually sort of physically taking a walk around, and then the penny dropped and it occurred to me that our St Peter's campus directly overlooks the River Wear. We're on the riverside, and we're super close to really nice beaches. So when that penny dropped, it became much easier to focus on sustainable goal number 14, life below water, conserving and sustainably using the ocean, seas and marine resources. Laura is going to talk in with much more eloquence and experience a little bit later on in our conversation today about the broader picture with the UN SDGs and how they're embedded both in curriculum and across the university. So the SDG of 14 was a springboard. It allowed the concept of responsible citizenship and a global compass. For me personally, it gifted real local scene setting, linking it directly with a global narrative, and that was super important given the international mix of our student participants. There was some really sort of lovely moments where using the SDG 14 and water helped me to create some storytelling and narrative around connectivity and the fact that we are all connected through rivers and oceans. I think with the sprint and with people who are unknown to each other, there's lots of different factors going on as a facilitator, and it's almost like you need to get people really comfortable in talking at the outset. And to do that, you need, in my experience, to do it in a very simple way. And that lent itself, the whole mission of SDG 14 lent itself to a super simple warm-up activity where I simply put large pieces of flip chart paper on the tables and drew the River Wear in the middle of it and asked students to literally group together, get some pens, write on a post-it note a river or an ocean that was important to them, either somewhere from their home country or somewhere that they visited, which meant something to them. And this worked really well in a sense that it enabled and elicited really rich conversation between the students from the get-go. And there was an exploration, I think, of empathy in the conversation. It was really heartwarming, incredibly sort of goosebump moment for me when I could hear a home student from Sunderland talking about his experiences growing up close to the Wear, and another student talking about his growing up near the River Ganges. So I think my message in that is to keep it simple at the outset, but once the talking starts, within those sort of 15, 20 minutes at the outset, it becomes much easier for people to continue in that way. A few years ago, I'd seen a little bit of John Alexander and read The Citizen Story. I won't talk about it in any length or depth, but he talks about the importance of behavioural change happening when we switch our mindsets from being consumers to citizens. And he talks about the positive societal impact that can have. I'll recommend a couple of things in this chat, not necessarily going, as I say, into great depth about them, but flagging them up in case they're of interest, you know, after the event today. John Alexander's theme of citizenship tied in really well with place-based innovation. With that in mind, that became very much part of the key goals of this sprint day. And they were dreaming of imaginative ideas to protect river and coast ecosystems, exploring a challenge. The students hadn't really done that before, so this was a first. Investigating, deliberating, debating, the importance of co-creating solutions and underlining as much as I possibly could do at the outset, that this was a safe space to have those conversations and put all of your ideas out there. It sounds like a cliche to say there's no such thing as a bad idea, but that was really my mantra from the outset. Students had the opportunity to prototype their ideas for impact, design and present their concepts, and they were invited afterwards, and that continues, to come back to the Digital Incubator, which is our community hub here at University of Sunderland, to develop further. The intention was, of course, to grow entrepreneurial mindsets, curiosity, connections, and creating value. Much came out about value, not only from a citizenship perspective, but actually from a personal one, with some introspection on that from the individual students. Creative confidence is everything when you're putting people together in a sprint. Confidence is situational, but there are certain sort of means and tactics that you can use to unlock creativity and confidence with it. Really important to me, showcasing the adoption of good enough, not perfect. And I talked at the outset about how our education system, certainly in my lived experience in the UK, there is this expectation that you keep on passing exams and succeeding. And therefore, sometimes we come at things from a mindset of only showing our best work. And actually, you know, there's lots which is cultural in that, of actually just putting it out there when it's good enough, not perfect. Meeting new people on the day, diversity, and I can't stress this enough, is absolutely game-changing to innovation. And I know that from my sort of previous experience in industry, particularly. And a chance to introduce, to increase network connections for the students, not only alongside their student peers, but also with the external speakers, which I'll come on to. Why did we do it? In a complex world order, the intention was that students felt listened to and empowered in the face of a wicked problem. That conversation was something that I explored at the outset about students, young people generally feeling quite disenchanted and hopeless and helpless. Can they make a difference? And part of this was trying to sort of communicate, yes, you can, small steps can make a big difference. Equally, not preaching to the students. Laura and I talked at some length about plastic. The ultimate solutions from the students focused on single-use plastic and trying to decrease that as a university. But I think our intention was to not, you know, put it out there and upfront, plastic is absolutely evil. Actually, plastic, as Laura and I chatted, and she had tremendous experience on this from a healthcare perspective, plastic's vital in hospitals, for example. So it wasn't necessarily being preachy, making anything the enemy, but taking a look at individual steps and how they might in turn make big global shifts. As said, the Solve took place in the Digital Incubator Community Hub at St Peter's campus. This is our hub for startups, and it's where we run our sessions, startup skills sessions, helping support new businesses. Its riverside location and close proximity to the River Wear and Roker and Seaburn was an absolute gift for this sprint. I'm going to just set the scene a little bit by showing you some, I think, pretty pictures of where we're at. It's quite there's so much going on the campus, but it blends that busyness and high student numbers with a really tranquil setting. I think what worked well focusing on the River Wee was actually some students may well come to Sunderland University because of our location, our place. And we directly connect at the end of our campus to the North Sea. I'll give you a shot just for context of the interior of our lovely digital incubator. It lends itself really well to a sprint. In terms of who was in the space, as said at the outset, internal participants were a real blend of students with subject areas ranging from illustration through to data science, engineering, marketing and business. And it had some added benefits in that it provided an opportunity for a student coach to gain event experience, and for a photography student who managed to enhance her professional portfolio by capturing images on the day. As said before, getting external speakers and support and engagement for me is key with sprints and indeed with entrepreneurial learning and development. That requires some real sort of leveraging your contact base and actually very quick relationship building with people who are perhaps unknown to you and bringing them on board with your idea. I'll give you an overview of who we had in the room in terms of those external speakers. So we're absolutely delighted to have the partnership working for this with City of Sunderland Council. Laura has strong connections already through the sustainability work that she does. And we brought in senior managers from the Sustainable Regeneration team for the city. They were present at the sprint. They gave up a considerable amount of time on the day with a thought-provoking talk about citywide activities and actually the key challenges around customer population engagement when you're trying to make changes with sustainable behaviour. They participated in a lively panel Q&A for the students. We also had at the pre-sprint walk and talk a wonderful, highly engaging team from Coast Sunderland, the Ranger team. Their project focuses on the preservation of our coastline. And they came along, you know, talking about how their work protects the landscape and wildlife that is iconic to Sunderland's coastline. They were real great guides, hugely entertaining for everyone, and I learned so much from being with them. And then we had Chris Hines, MBE, prominent global speaker, co-founder of the charity Surface Against Sewage, and the former sustainability director of the Eden Project. And he currently features in Channel 4's Uncovering the Water and Sewage Scandal series, Dirty Business, which some of you may have already seen. If not, I'd recommend it. It is a difficult but really important watch. Chris was absolutely wonderful, and he created a bespoke inspirational film of himself directly addressing our students in the room at the sprint, introducing his concept of intelligent activism. And he talked about the 89% project, which is a merge of covering Climate Now and The Guardian. It's a journalistic one-year project, and you know, could talk about it at length, can't do that here, and you can certainly take a look at it afterwards. But the research has shown that 89% of the world's population, and I think this has gone, you know, it has gone worldwide in terms of a research project. Upshot is 89% of the world's population would like government to act stronger on climate change. Starting in some ways at the finish, I wanted to share a snapshot of some of our students at the end of 8.5 hours of being together in a room, talking, high octane energy, moments of calm and tranquility. Everyone's still smiling. Laura and I are just there in the middle, and Chris Hines is in the background on a slide. Our students were wonderful, and I absolutely loved spending time with them. Another quick pick of our wonderful Sunderland team who gave up their time and energy, incredibly busy people. And Chris Hines, you know, at the height of his being a media hound, as he called himself. Surface Against Sewage was a great addition to the sprint. It added gravitas, it added weight, and listening, it was wonderful for me and quite goosebump inducing to see the students say, wow, when they were listening to Chris. He's classed by the Independent as, you know, Surface Against Sewage has been Britain's coolest pressure group. I love what he says in terms of such a simple message. Chris said, we can and should all be activists in our professional and personal lives. It's payback for the joy we get from surfing in the oceans. And again, this is a shot of Chris there on the left. Him played as an actor in that series, Dirty Business. It's extraordinary, it's urgent, and it's what happens when ordinary people challenge systems. And that enabled much conversation in the room about systems thinking on my part to the students. Chris's ultimate message was a ripple effect. The behavioural change in one person, no matter how small, can have a huge amalgamated impact worldwide. And that was important. It was important to stress to the students, you know, we've got COP happening every year, we've got world leaders meeting to try and do things to make sustainable change. We're not asking this generation or the particular demographic in the room to solve problems that they didn't cause. We're just taking a look at little shifts which can make seismic differences in results. How did I do this in terms of innovation? I used sources that I've already used before in industry, including Jake Knapp from Google Ventures Sprint Process. I use design thinking. I've got a long and strong background in design-led businesses in the UK and beyond. And I use the Design Council's double diamond methodology to structure this sprint in very simple 4-phase process. I'll show you a snapshot of that too soon. With an exploration of creative confidence and the power of divergent and convergent thinking, and I did some exercises mapping what that looks like when you put out your wild ideas and then you streamline them into practicality. And for that, I looked to IDEO and empathy mapping to support human-centred approach. So students were fed with a lot of sources and ideas and then sort of sent off with continual sort of, interaction on my part to start generating ideas. That's the sprint, Jake Knapp book. It's wonderful. He suggests doing sprints in 5 days. This was very much a daily dash, do it in 1 day. I thought it was important to share with the students the how might we formula. Some of you who've run sprints or been involved as participants will have seen this. I think it's a wonderful way to unlock creativity because it's a no pressure mentality. Tim Brown, I mentioned IDEO, the global design and innovation business based in San Francisco with an office in London. I've spent quite a bit of time learning and talking to them. He breaks it down really simply. The how part assumes that there are answers out there and it provides creative confidence. The might says we can put ideas out there. They may or may not work. It's okay either way. And the we is very much we're all in this together, building on each other's ideas. I use the Design Council's methodology, as said, the double diamond, which is in 4 phases. So the morning of the sprint was about discovery and research and talking and definition. Right, we're focused on what the key problem is. In this case, it was single-use plastic. How are we going to look at measures, processes and systems to decrease that at our university? In the afternoon, students came back and developed. They created their prototypes for potential solutions. There was no pressure to do anything really fancy with that. It could be drawings or words. And the final part was delivery. In a typical delivery, you would do quite a bit of market testing. We didn't have the opportunity to do that with the confines of a one-day sprint. However, students were invited to do so afterwards. Delivery here, I think the particular point of it was that the students actually got up and pitched in teams. And they trusted the process. They followed a structured step-by-step methodology rather than jumping to conclusions or fixating on a perfect end product from the outset. I'm going to skip through quite quickly, but importantly, some of the key takeaways. What could have been done differently? What could be better next time round? We could try a different day of the week or even a weekend. The volume of sign-up numbers is always tricky on a weekday. People have got commitments, caregiving, part-time jobs, curriculum. Event promotion was scattered across multiple platforms. We're still gathering data on what is best in terms of prompting action to engage. Could we have provided digital badges or certificates? Yes, that would have been an idea then and could be for the future. My key point in all of this was it was not a competition. And whilst we recognised, the productivity of everybody, it wasn't about winning a prize. There was no budget there to do that, and we didn't particularly want to make it competitive. Another thing to look at for future is how you keep the momentum going for the students in terms of developing the ideas that they generated on the day. And again, there's continual invitation, encouragement to come back to the digital incubator. Absolutely delighted to say that that is certainly happening. Some students suggested extending the pitch time afterwards in their feedback, which was interesting because I kept it really tight because I didn't know if they might be apprehensive or nervous, but in fact, it actually surprisingly and beautifully flipped the other way. And the weather. Hosting an innovation sprint in the northeast in November means a high probability that you're cold. You need your wellies, you need your woolies. So when we did the pre-sprint walk and talk, the outdoor touch the world immersive experience, as I like to call it, it was raining a lot and that impacted numbers. Key messages on some things that worked really well. I think enterprise is a vehicle for sustainable development, extending it from startups and pitching through to problem solving for planetary good. It works really well in terms of the agenda of the university. No competition, no prize, no cost. There was no pressure to win anything at the end. This was about purpose and giving students a pathway to it. Design thinking absolutely builds confidence, not just ideas. The process and openness to it mattered just as much, and in my view, actually more than the output. Short intensity formats deliver deep impact. So I would recommend everybody, if you're doing anything like this, to pilot boldly. We used UN SDG 14. This format and design thinking in the double diamond fits around any SDG. I think place-based enterprise workshops are really powerful. They create deep connection and stronger ownership. That was particularly important because some of the students had been in the UK, the people who attended the sprint for less than a month. So grounding it in this is your place, this is your city, was super helpful. It strengthened a town-gown relationship. Students listened to a panel of speakers from the local council, met with the coast team, and I think that external partnership elevated their learning, and they felt listened to and recognised, and it brought credibility. That sort of high energy nature of a sprint and moving quickly, I think you also need to bring in sort of spaces for introspection and quiet reflection. And I'll talk in a minute about how I did that at the end of the sprint. I'm going to leave that on the screen for 60 seconds. We've got a wealth of feedback from the students. Really delighted to say it was super positive. If you wanted to take a look, as I say, for a few seconds on what's on the screen up front. So Laura, at this point, I'm going to hand over to you. I've fast-tracked, I've literally sprinted through the sprint there. I'm going to come back to innovation a bit towards the end, but I'm conscious I need to hand over to you now to talk sustainability, Laura. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yeah, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about how this initiative really supports what we're trying to do on sustainability at the university. So, you know, we do believe that universities across the board are in a unique place really to play a key role in overcoming some of the threats posed by climate change and other environmental challenges and social challenges, obviously through research and technology development, but also through this knowledge and skills development that's going to be needed to implement them. There's a well-documented skills gap in the UK in terms of what's going to be required to transition to a green economy. And it's not just in the traditional fields like engineering or environmental management, it's in all sorts of things like business and finance and HR and, you know, creative industries and across the board really. So we see this really fitting in with what we see as our ambitions, and we're quite a purpose-driven organisation with clear ambitions to be student-focused, professions-facing and society-shaping. And to me, sustainability, I don't think you can be those three things without considering sustainability and sustainable development. So it really kind of fits in so nicely with what this team is doing as well. And can I have my next slide, Angela, please? Sure. So why that this approach in particular is useful in engaging students with sustainability is often I found that in sustainability solutions are presented as simple. Quite often you hear, oh, everyone just needs to whatever, recycle more, buy less, use public transport, etc. But if it was that easy, if it was simple, we wouldn't be in the state we're in. And I often think that if your solution starts with the phrase "everyone just needs to," then it's not really a solution. So what we're really doing with this approach is engaging the students in the complexity of the problem, and then helping them to develop and hone the skills that are going to be needed to solve some of the problems. So not least interdisciplinary collaboration. You know, having worked myself in complicated systems and trying to implement what can on the face of it seem like a simple solution, but as soon as you soon find yourself working with multiple departments with different systems, different requirements, their own particular background or, you know, aims that they want to get out of something, it quickly becomes very complicated. So I think that is one of the key things that we can develop. As well as things that Angela's touched on around social awareness and what our civic responsibility is as a university. And as I've mentioned, trying to prepare students, and this is a real key way of engaging, is that issue of employability, and that this is going to be a really beneficial skill for you and really enhance your kind of prospects once you leave. Next slide. So I mean, obviously you've all understand and have come across wicked problems before. I think sustainability and sustainable development challenges are a good example of wicked problems. And those examples that I've put there on the slide, you know, all of them have got an environmental factor involved in them. So using the Sustainable Development Goals as a way of trying to convey sustainability is really useful because they're all interconnected. You can't really solve one of the challenges without solving all of them. And also it really underlines the importance of having a healthy environment if we're going to have a functioning society and a thriving economy on top of that as well. Next slide. And I suppose the other thing to say is why now? And I mean, obviously, from a sustainability point of view, you know, the crises are getting worse and we're reaching kind of crucial moments. But that aside, I think that industries and professions are acting on sustainability now, and they need the skills amongst their workforce to help them do this. And I think that this should be our graduates that are going to be placed into doing that. For us, in Sunderland, the northeast of England, has been prioritised in the UK net zero strategy. There's lots happening. There's a strong renewable energy sector, innovations like hydrogen and carbon capture, some of the UK's first decarbonised industrial clusters in Teesside, strong research and development skills base. So it's a really good opportunity for us to take advantage of. And coming on to my next point there about the civic university, I think one of our main roles we can do is to prepare the people of Sunderland to be able to benefit from this transition and see it as a good thing for the region. So, you know, that's kind of why here and why now. And the business case for sustainability for a university is just getting ever stronger. It's becoming more and more prominent part of leagues and rankings. And, you know, we've just had to complete a supplier return to be a supplier to NHS England, which is clearly putting us on a pathway to be able to continue to provide services for others. We need to be thinking about this and doing as much as we can. Next slide. So, as I said when I introduced myself, that this is one of the things that I do. Obviously, the sustainability plan for the university covers a lot of different elements, and sustainable education and research is just one of them. Next slide. So this is what we're committed to doing, is that we think that every student will graduate with the knowledge and skills needed to navigate the increasing environmental and social impacts of their chosen careers. Next slide. And so how we're trying to do that is to develop a framework that will support academics to be able to do this in a consistent way, and link in with some of the other agendas around the university as well. And as Angela mentioned, feeling overwhelmed by all 17 of the goals, we totally recognise that. And what we're not trying to do is make everyone experts in the sustainable development goals, but the key is to understand which are the most relevant to your profession. So that's where we see ourselves starting here, is to ensure that the programme teams themselves have good understanding of what the sustainable development goals are that are being looked at in their profession. So that could be looking at professional bodies and industry standards, etc. And then once we've got that, we can look at how we weave those into the courses and the programs, and then to get up to the stages through the stages, rather, I should say, to stage 3, where we sort of see excellence being that all of the most relevant and material sustainable development goals are embedded in core modules, but most importantly, that there's opportunity for work integrated and entrepreneurial learning experiences, because, as we've mentioned, they are so useful in really getting that across, that these are key skills and that you can have an impact on this no matter what it is you're going to go on to do after you leave the university. The next slide. Yeah, so these are the 17 goals, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And yeah, as I've mentioned, we don't want everyone just to shoehorn in a lesson on the sustainable development goals. We think that the key to it is to understanding which ones are most relevant. So looking at where the pressures are in the industry and where you as an expert can have the biggest impact. So you would do some kind of materiality review and look at which ones you really want to focus on, understanding that that, you know, we need to be having that environmental standards so that we can have the other elements like this society and economic related goals. And then I think the next slide is my last one. So how this approach helps us with sustainability at the university and helps us with our agenda. I think we've been through all of these really. It brings sustainability to life. It's about that relevance. It makes sure our graduates are better equipped. It links to other agendas in the university like Spark, which is a sort of is a framework which has been used to kind of develop sort of graduate attributes, I suppose. And it links to the wider agenda around the purpose of the university and what it is we're here to do and what we're here to do for Sunderland. Oh no, there's one more. And how it benefited me in particular. has been one of the most effective ways we have engaged with students. We try and do a lot of varied things to engage students, and this is one of the most effective. And I think it is because of that relevance and because of that link to employability, and because it has meaningful outcomes and projects and initiatives that come out of it.
Thanks, Laura. A couple of points on how I feel that it's benefited me in my innovation practice. Intentionally thinking, as always, about inclusion, particularly so with an international mix of students, making sure that, for example, really simple things like the video format case studies that I showed highlighted global widespread entrepreneurs. I think really important for me on that day was reading the room, staying agile and facilitating what was needed, not just what was planned. I'd planned a wealth of material. Some of it was more in depth around design thinking, for example, and I just had to flex the content on the day and switch it up a bit and do things on the spot, while still adhering to that time-based, time-structured process, from context setting at the outset through to challenge framing, through to that really rapid concept creation to prototypes, and then articulating those and pitching. A phrase came into my head that adapt deliberately, lead responsibly when you're doing this in a university setting, and also breathe, because it was so full on fast. What stood out to me wasn't just the ideas emerged, but the transformation in how the participants engaged. And that was, for me, a win, a celebration, how they engaged with each other, how they engaged with uncertainty and with their own confidence. When delivering and working on innovation sprints, it's super important always to park any assumptions outside the door. In this case, it was a little bit different for me on a personal level. I'm from Sunderland originally, but this is the first time I've ever worked in my home city. I've worked, in other cities across the UK, etc. But this was extra special, I think, in a sense that it showed me the power of true place-based innovation sprints done in my home city. Yeah.
People are attending anyway.
Sorry? Sunderland's a place built on resilience and is currently reinventing. They're both key in innovation, and it added, a special sort of layer for me personally, in that I guess I care when I deliver sprints. I particularly cared in that sprint because I wanted people to feel good being in Sunderland, full stop. We're coming to the close of the presentation, but I thought I'd share with you something that worked particularly well, and I think it locks in directly with sustainability. A few years ago, I had the great pleasure and privilege of spending a bit of time alongside Ada Paris. She's on the Google I Am Remarkable board. If you're interested in finding out more, she has a TED talk entitled "What Type of Ancestor Do You Want to Be? Time Capsules, Echoes for Tomorrow." Another great source on that theme is Stanford D schools, closely linked with IDEO and their future thinking. Much of this sprint was asking students to do that future thinking piece, and they certainly did, and then some. Stanford do a lovely activity, Portrait of a Descendant. Where I'm going at with those two examples is that after a fast-paced session, I feel that it's important to take some time to just have a moment of calm and reflect. And I asked the students the question to consider what type of ancestor they would like to be, to close their eyes for a minute in the room and think on that. And with that in mind, what I was getting to was, if you know a child who has another child, how would you like your own individual actions to help shape a better world? for the future. You never know how these things are going to go, but I'm delighted to say that the students certainly engaged with that. Perhaps everybody was ready for that moment of calm towards the end. Both of those sources are worth taking a look at. And my encouragement at the end was that that was an introspective piece that led directly into them perhaps identifying what their own personal values are. Values are super important when it comes to sustainability and indeed innovation. We're coming to a close now. I think we've got 10 minutes or so for a chat, some questions. Bringing creativity and art is important, I think, in innovation. And in the room, we had conversation around Mandy Barker, who's an international award-winning photographic artist. She'd worked alongside Stanford too. And her work involves marine plastic debris. And she's taken some amazing, horrifying, jaw-dropping imagery of plastic in our oceans. Thanks, everybody. And thanks for the invite to share some of our experience with you today.
Thank you too so much. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Laura, for that really brilliant, comprehensive and interesting walkthrough of the sprint. We've got 6 minutes for questions. And while people might be gathering their thoughts, I'm just going to take the opportunity to jump in with certainly one. So if you've got any questions, do feel free to come out from behind your screen or unmute or whatnot. But one of the things that I wanted to ask was about, I think at one point you said that students, or you were thinking, how do they pick up on what they've done in that sprint afterwards? And you might have hinted that something was happening, but yeah, what's the legacy of it? How are students picking up? How does the impact for them move beyond a day? Yeah.
Absolutely. And that in itself is a challenge with, busy student lives and varied commitments. That is certainly a challenge. However, what I do at University of Sunderland, Catherine, is I run an explore and test session, which is about validating ideas. It doesn't matter what stage that idea is at. If you've got a business idea or a product or a process idea, how do you validate whether it's got viability? Locked into that is very much a piece around identifying your personal values, which synergizes with the sprint. So students, I'm delighted to say, were given all of the information about what we're doing in the digital incubator, came along afterwards, and some of them have continued and joined our startup skills series. It's an ongoing piece to get students to come back. You'll notice, you will have all noticed, no doubt, that I didn't share the ideas that the students generated on the day. I talked loosely around them. And I think it's important from a sort of protection perspective that some of them have said that they would like to come back at some stage, varied stages, and develop those ideas. So it's an ongoing piece of work. And Laura, do you have anything to add to that?
Not in particular. I think that is one of the challenges, is how I suppose you won't necessarily know the impact immediately, and how until with something like sustainability, ideas and can take quite a long time to kind of ferment, and it might not be, from my point of view, until they go off and 10 years down the line in their careers that they really are able to really have an impact. But we're sort of sowing the seeds and giving them the skills now to be able to do that, throughout their lives.
And I think that, again, I touched on it in the chat, that on a personal level for me, it was about, yes, creating solutions, but actually learning that process, which will support you not only in business startup, but also through your studies and life in general. That whole sort of process of, I have a problem, how do I get an answer to it? Here are some sort of systems and frameworks that I can use. I firmly believe that the double diamond, that 4-step process, translates into the everyday problem, as well as, you know, the new idea for a business.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And then I've got a couple of other questions, but we've got two minutes. So I'll roll two things in together and then you'll have like seconds to say something about them. But one thing that I was really interested in was that you'd chosen not to run it as a competition, and actually you got some really nice phrases in those early slides to get students thinking it's not just a challenge and a pitch, but that anyway, that bit was really nice. But I was interested in like what was your instinct behind doing it like that. And then I don't know if this is connected too, because at one point you had a picture of John Alexander's Citizen book, and I was wondering, is that for you? Like, do you know, have you read that and thought we need to make that shift, or are you also communicating that to students? You've got like 30 seconds.
Well, a combination of both. I enjoy learning about behavioural change and how we can actually create that, because it's extraordinarily difficult. Sunderland City Council said that in a much more eloquent way than I am about, you know, changing behaviours in Sunderland City. It was really wanting to suggest to students there are resources out there. Here are some that I think are really great. And Catherine, on that day, students came up and said, can I borrow your book? Can I borrow Sprint? Is it in the library? I'd like to read more. So it was planting seeds, but not imposing.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's fantastic. And you brought us in on the hour, so that's amazing. Thank you so much, Angela and Laura Foster. Thank you so much for bringing your colleagues together to be part of this session. It was absolutely fantastic, really super clear. We've got this recording. If you're willing to share the slides, that would be amazing, and we can circulate those, or people can email Shagan for those. Our next session for the SIG is April the 8th. It's at 12, and it's Dave Jarman who will be doing something on the crisis. Like, should we mention the crises? How do we kind of locate venture creation stuff within the poly crisis? What are the opportunities and risks? And amazing, Shagan has just shared a link to that, and then you can sign up there. So thank you again, Angela and Laura, for arranging. That was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And please keep in touch, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Bye.
Really, really helpful. Thank you. Yeah, I'm just gonna stop recording so that I can say a massive thank you to